Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one person or one starfish at a time. As always, guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. That's how we get the word out about what we do. I know you'll want to share today's episode. It's a good friend of mine, Tony. Tony and I have been friends through Arte for, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 years, 8 years. I don't know, time flies, something like that. Tony runs a very successful coaching business where he helps, specializes in helping people exit their companies, which I think that's pretty cool. But he's been in this industry for quite a while. Started his own business back in 2001 while being an engineer. So he's also done the corporate side of life. So I'm excited. We'll get into his story as we go through things. Thanks for being on the show, Tony.
Well, Angela, you are a starfish yourself, and I'm happy to be on your show, and I look forward to catching up here.
Awesome. I love it. Well, let's go back. Let's dig in. 2001, you started, your own business while you were engineering. Um, Kind of how did that work? And then what did your family think of like when you did get out of engineering? So touch a little bit about all of that.
Oh, those are two good questions. Age 28 at that time, and I actually pursued my mechanical engineering degree. I put myself through college being a construction worker, a laborer, a welder, and waiting tables on the weekend. So I valued that degree and that education that I received, but the intention for engineering was to go into automotive because I'm a car guy, as you know, and I love cars and I've been building cars since I was a kid. And I imagined that when I get that engineering degree, I'd probably go work in Detroit area and Big Three, but I happen to be based in Houston. And back then we did phone interviews, especially for new engineers. And I was listening to these salary offers and they were pretty low. And I was kind of thinking, man, this sucks. I got to move to Detroit, which is not really that desirable to me. And also I'm not going to be really making much more than I was at a construction job. And so I decided to start taking on some calls with oil and gas here in Houston, which is like the capital of the world for oil and gas. And I quickly realized that they were offering basically double the salary of automotive engineers. And so I could stay in my home city and actually afford the cars that I would be otherwise designing instead of just looking at them on paper. And so I went down that road, oil and gas. And I still had that itch that I wanted to scratch for automotive because I was like, I still wanted to do something in that space or build cars or at least at the very least get my hobbies paid for by building some kind of company that I could expense things and get discounts on parts and stuff I was going to buy anyways. And so I started ls1tech.com in November of 2001 as a way to one, teach myself how to do graphic design, website design, and to get those hookups on the free parts and sponsorships and things like that. And so that's
Very
the reason
smart.
I started the website.
Very smart. I love it. Now, were your parents entrepreneurial at all? Or like, why did you even think like most people aren't like, well, I need to start something to support my hobby and make this a write-off. Like that's not the first thought of most people. So where did
My
that even
parents
come
are
from?
absolutely not entrepreneurs. I don't think there was any entrepreneurs in my entire family or
Oh.
extended family that I know of. And it was really just because I grew up without any money. And so I had to be very resourceful. And
Mm,
so even as a kid, I was the one that would go buy a box of Jolly Ranchers and blow pops, and I would sell those at school and double my money. And I would just kind of keep rolling that money back into making more and more of those. And so it's kind of
interesting.
a candy drug dealer. It's a very common story, actually, finding here a lot of the people in the influencer space kind of did the same thing, but it was easy money. And I would knock doors to mow yards and rake leaves and wash cars and walk
Mm,
dogs. And so I was always doing that because my parents didn't have any money, but they always supported me in figuring out how to go do stuff. So
cool.
that was how I was able to buy my BMX bikes and my skateboards and my video games. And so I just never really complained about doing things that were necessary. I just went out and did it.
Yeah, I like how you said that and caught that. His parents didn't have money, so if you're like a parent, but they supported him, and I really like
That's
that
right.
because I think some people don't get the support, and then they just like that entrepreneurial dies really young. Because they, not every parent would be like, okay, go knock on doors. So I'm glad that they supported you and like, hey, go out. I know I was pretty entrepreneurial as a kid too. I tried a lot of different things. So that
My
makes
benefit
sense.
is I could run really fast at that age. So if someone were trying to abduct me, I could just run. They weren't going to catch me. They might end up with a lawnmower.
That's so funny. I love that. So you started at a very young age being
Mhm.
entrepreneurial, because you guys were broke and you
Yes.
wanted things. And I just think, so many people think their struggles are a problem, but it's your struggles that make you who you are.
Yeah.
And
The
it's
only
just
the only gifts I ever got were my birthday and Christmas, and that was it. And those happened to be back-to-back months. So what do you do for the rest of the 10 months?
right. It sounds so familiar. Like I just feel resonate because we were like broke. That's yeah, same thing. I was like, I'm never gonna be here again. So you started in the, you started the online for the cars. So you could get your car parts for a write-off or something like that
Yeah,
while you're
that
still
was my
doing engineering and corporate. What
absolutely.
what made you transition out of corporate into completely like entrepreneurship 100%?
Well, that was a long path. I think there was about a 12 to 12, 13-year overlap where I was
Yeah.
actually earning more from my website than I was from my engineering salary. And I built the website. Initially, I was the one doing all the front loading. I was doing all the server management. I was doing all the graphic design, all the marketing, all the stuff. And so that was a lot of time, but I loved doing it because it was building something that served car guys. It was like my circle, right? And I was getting a lot of hookups. And initially, my initial side hustle back then was also I would get car magazines and I would look through these things and go, hey, this ad for this company doesn't have a URL. There's no website. So I knew right away they didn't have a website because this is late 90s. And I said, okay, I'll call the number on there. I'll email and ask if they have a website. And if not, I'll trade them a website for car parts that I needed that they manufactured. Right. And so it was like this bartering system. And then I fully modified a car and I was like, okay, now I need another vehicle because I don't have any, I don't need any more parts for this one. And so I bought a 4x4 truck and then I started getting truck parts for it. And so building websites and stuff like that was part of the long-term thing. Even 3 or 4 years into owning the company, people would come and say, "Hey, I wanna advertise on your website, but I don't have a web page." And it's like, "Well, I can build you a web page too." So I was getting paid to build a web page for them so they could advertise for me. So I was kind of double dipping the revenue on that end. And,
Really
so I always make sure I was doing that in my spare time, and I didn't really, I mean, really early on, I was probably spending 3 or 4 hours a day in the evenings doing it. Later on, probably 2 years in when I implemented processes and systems and the right people and staff and had a part-time server admin guy that was doing all the stuff that I used to do, I could really spend maybe 3 hours a week on it. And at that point, the website was making about 400,000 a year profit, which is a lot of money, especially in the early 2000s, 20 years ago. And at the
part-time.
time, my engineering salary was probably around 140, 150. And so I had the lifestyle and I had the cars and all that stuff that was way further advanced in my career. And, some of the coworkers, they thought that was pretty cool, but there was also sometimes people that had a little envy and a little resentment about that. And I saw that rear its ugly head a couple times and layoff cycles in oil and gas where
Mm.
I'd be laid off even though I was a high performer. They'd say, "Well, you got other things going on, so I know you'll be okay." Like they were trying to satisfy their own guilt of laying people off by
Mm.
saying like, "Oh, he has money outside, like we can lay him off." And
Mhm.
and it happened to me twice, and I realized like, okay, this is not really a compliment. This is them trying to satisfy their own guilt. Like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you'll bounce back. You got this other thing going on, right?" And it's like, that's not a reason to lay people off like that.
No.
I'm actually working extra to have that. And so around 2015, we had a massive oil industry downturn and people were getting laid off left and right, waves of thousands of people. I was staff at Chevron, big company, top of the food chain thing. And I knew I was going to get laid off when we finished our project because there was nothing left on the books afterwards. And I started to see these large corporations, not just Chevron, but many of them just mistreat their employees for years and years and years. And it's like, man, they pretend they care about their employees, and then a downturn comes and they just chop heads. And it's relentless. Sometimes 20, 30% of your workforce, thousands,
Mhm.
tens of thousands of people globally. And as I was ascending the corporate ladder, it became where my signature was the one that having to approve these kind of things. And I just disagreed with them from a core values, fundamental thing. And I started to have really like a lot of stress and feeling like, this isn't the right path. And the higher I climb on this ladder, it's just going to get worse. Like I'm going to have to be the one that everybody associates their name to this kind of stuff. And so
Okay.
after the downturn, I had some soul searching. I was in my early 40s at that time. And I said, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm not here to make multi-billion dollar companies more billions of dollars while they just disregard people and, at the drop of a hat. And so I decided in 2015 after that, I was like, I don't think I want to come back. I wanted to create more impact in the world and, help people with things that I keep getting asked for advice on. And that was kind of a clue. It was like building businesses and scaling businesses and exiting businesses. I had all that experience. And so I was always being asked by my peers and coworkers and friends for that advice. I just never did it publicly. I was always mentoring people privately up until about 2017.
And then you quit the job and you're full time.
Yeah, no, I haven't
Finally.
looked back. It's hard to believe it's coming up on 10 years already. At the end of this year, it'll be 10 years.
Wow. So when you went through all that, do you have, anybody, I mean, you've been doing it for quite a while and you were pretty successful, obviously, at that point. So I'm guessing, but I could be wrong. Do you have a lot of people that thought it was crazy that you got completely out of oil and gas? Or, at that point, did you build something pretty solid and people were like, it makes sense if you're making 4 times or more what you're making at your job, you probably should quit your job.
Absolutely. Even when there was periods where I was unemployed between layoffs, because that happens in the oil industry probably every
Yeah,
7, 8 years. It's kind
yeah,
of
that's a
like
lot.
clockwork. And it's kind of funny because my mom, being a Japanese immigrant, she really valued education and she was very strict on grades. I was a straight A student, top of the class kind of situation. And whenever I was unemployed, even though I was had income coming in from my businesses, she would say, "Tony, are you still looking for a job? Are you going to use that engineering degree?" And I'm like, "Mom, I'm okay." And I knew where that was coming from is because she realized all the effort and sacrifice I had to put in at earning that.
Yeah, and she
She
probably was
sacrificed it.
hardworking kind of.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
valued education, the things that she didn't receive as a baby boomer generation Japanese woman. They kind of get pushed into the orchards to pick fruit at after junior high education.
right.
And so she really valued that. And, even after exiting a company, millions of dollars and stuff like that, she would always like ask me, like, "Are you still looking for a job?" And I get it. I couldn't be mad or understood where it was coming from. I get it. And I was like, "Mom, I'm doing okay." I was like, if I ever have to ask you for money, I'll give you permission to ask me if I'm looking for a job." And so she thought it was scary. And even a lot of my friends, especially in the oil industry, because by that time I was multiple six-figure earner in oil and gas and
Yeah,
had a lot of peers at that same level. When they saw that I was leaving something, 20 plus years of experience and multiple six-figure salary and all the pension and the benefits and all the stuff that
security.
carrot that they dangle at the end of the stick, they thought I was kinda crazy. They didn't really understand. Actually, even one of my former coworkers he didn't know me that well, but he accused me of being a grifter. It's like, "Oh, you're gonna go be a motivational speaker and take advantage of people that don't know any better," and he sent me this scathing LinkedIn post. It's
Wow.
like, "Dave," it's like, "we only worked together for a year. You never even asked me about what I did outside of work. Like, we were just coworkers." And I was like, "Here's the things I've actually done." And he was like, "Oh, shit. I apologize profusely." He's an English guy. And he goes, I'm just tired of people taking advantage of other people." And I thought it was kind of
He
funny
was
how
triggered, obviously,
it's such a
hugely.
triggered response. I mean, he, like, unfriended me on Facebook, and this was, like, when I announced what I was doing, and I was like, "Whoa, I didn't expect that kind of backlash." We were always cool with each other at work, so people just didn't understand, and
Well, it doesn't even affect him. It's so
didn't
interesting.
affect him. But I was a grifter, and I was gonna go steal money from people and be a motivational speaker. I don't like calling myself a motivational speaker anyways, like that,
I know you
like,
don't.
"Toto," like, speaking is like it's a marketing thing, it's a skill thing that we can enhance, enjoy doing, and it's performative, but I actually wanna help people scale and sell businesses, like, that's
Right.
what my experience was in.
Wow. So when you went through all of that, did it make you question anything or how did you deal with it? Or was it just like, whatever? Or how did it affect
No,
you?
it was tough. I've always been someone who has a high level of empathy, and I can sense other people and I really care about other people. And
Mhm.
when people say negative things to you, you kind of internalize those things because you're
Mm,
not used to dealing with that. Because, for most of my life, outside of like childhood bullies, obviously, but most of my life, I was likable and people liked me, and I'm okay with that. And I didn't really want to be putting myself out there, and I was not comfortable on stage, and I did not want to be on camera, and I was very private with my life. And to put yourself out there, that takes a lot of guts to do that. And when you receive some of the backlash from people that you actually know, they're not just strangers. You're like, "Whoa, is it me? Is it something that I'm doing? Is it am I pissing them off? Like, what's wrong with this? And
Mhm.
it was hard. I think the first year and a half, it was tough for my wife and I to kind of see that, especially some of the people we'd known for over 10 years and we've gone on vacation with. They just kind of didn't support what I was doing and didn't understand why. It was always like what it comes down to, Angela, is like people want to categorize because that's how we find stability in our life, and we want to put people in boxes. Like, oh, you're an engineer, you go in the engineer box. You're a car person, you go in the car guy box. Like they always want to do all this kind of organization with people. And when you do things to get outside of that box or something that's disrupting where they've placed you or categorized you, they kind of have this sense of like, oh crap, it's creating anxiety, and they want to keep you in your box. And so that's things I had to learn. And RTA was very handy in that as well early on. And so around 2018 is when I started realizing, okay, it's not about me because my intentions are the right things. I'm doing the right things. And people just have to deal with it or react how they want, and you just end up having to create some boundaries and just weed those people out. The people that are talking shit to you, you just gotta get rid of them. I mean, it's as simple as that, no matter how long you known them or if they're good people or whatnot. If they're not there to support or at least understand or at least, I don't see they have to be supportive, but they have to be maybe just okay with.
Not the opposite of supportive.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
they're attacking or they're doing things like I've had some legit haters like do some like pretty nasty things, and it's like those people exist out there, and sometimes they're people actually you run with right now in your circles.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's really good advice if you guys are listening, obviously, to this. Just let that stuff go, follow your path and, see where it goes. I mean, what's the worst case? You go back? Like, it's
Yeah,
really like feel like it's not
yeah.
really a big deal. And then you started that path and, and then how has it been? Like, what have you found since then? Have you ever regretted that you quit your job? Yeah, I don't think so, but I'm curious. And, what about the days that you want to quit? And just go back to a, say, salary job? Is there any days like that?
There's this when you asked about the regret and the coworkers and things like that. So I miss aspects of the career.
Mhm.
One is the severe level of planning that goes into multi-billion-dollar international projects. Like, I enjoyed the planning phase, the
Mhm.
financial decisions I had to make, and I
Mhm.
really became desensitized to money because growing up broke early in my career, I was managing $1 million projects, and I thought that was a shit ton of money, and I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, I was so stressed out, and because it was a lot of money to me personally, but
Right.
as you go through the projects and you're managing, half-billion-dollar projects and you're burning $1 million a day on your projects, you start to realize, like, I'm highly compensated, I have good experience, and they pay me to make the right decisions regardless of the dollar value, and the bigger the project value, the bigger the risk to a company, the more salary you earn, and so, project managers can make 40,000 a year, or they can make 400,000 or sometimes 1,000,000 a year depending on the company you work for, and so I value all that stuff and the things I got to learn and operating at the highest levels. I mean, we were doing deep water construction, the highest technology in oil and gas. And so I valued that kind of stuff and I enjoyed the aspects of moving big numbers and big parts and big decisions and high risk, high reward situations. But all that experience cascaded over into small business as well. And that's also why I was so successful in my small businesses. Was able to learn there and bring it back and implement certain things into my own companies. So regret? No, I don't regret leaving. I do, I have some friends that reached out. Actually, a week ago, a friend of mine that I've known for 20 years, I actually hired him at one of his first engineering jobs. He said, 10 years ago when you left, Tony, I didn't understand it because I didn't have any animosity, but I didn't understand but he said, but now today I'm around the age that you were when you left 10 years ago. And I just got laid off from my company because now I get it. Because now I get it. He goes, you're putting in 2 hours on the highway every day. You're putting another 8 hours on the company every day. So you're gone 10 hours a day. And he's got young kids, and he, he's like, and they don't value your time. They don't really care. And he goes, I got laid off. It felt really unprofessional the way they did it. And he goes, so for the third birthday in a row, I'm unemployed. And he goes, now I understand why you didn't want to come back. And he goes, I'm proud of you. And that was the last thing. He's like, I'm proud of you. And I say, hey, thanks for reaching out. I'm good to hear from you. And it gave him some well wishes, but it kinda just shows, like, that kind of message, and I've received similar over the years, like, it's always like when you have that doubt, like, "Man, should I go back? It was so much easier to make that kind of money, and, like, I didn't have to, like, do marketing and sales and, like,
Mhm.
all the hard things, and, the paychecks were predictable, and it was easier to get loans because you had,
Right.
W-2 stubs coming in, and when you get a message like that, you're like, "No, I made the right decision, and I'm glad I did it in my early 40s instead of my 60s like most people would do."
Mm. So good. So on the days you don't feel like doing all the things, I mean, we're 10 years in, so if you kind of back up, especially back when you first it was a little bit more, grind. I know there's still grind now, but it's different. When it was really hustle and grind, what got you out of bed on the days that you don't feel like it?
I've always been the type to just do what I needed to do even if I didn't feel like it. I don't require
Mhm.
motivation. I mean, like you heard, I was knocking doors as a kid. That like, nobody feels like doing that.
Right.
In fact, I have very little sympathy for people who make excuses. And even with yourself, like, I know you have physical challenges and things that you have to overcome, and you've always had a very optimistic personality, and you've been always someone who shined as an example just to go do it whatever it takes. Like, if that's what it takes, cool. Like, you even changed careers.
Yeah.
If that's what it takes, I'm just gonna do it. Should I learn
Sure.
from the right mentors? Yes. Like, spend the time and do that kind of stuff. Invest in the knowledge and retain that curiosity and the determination to go through things. I don't really care about the motivation. And when people tell me they, well, I don't have time to do that. I have children. Like, everybody wants to lay their excuses on everybody else about their situation. But at the end of the day, if we don't take full accountability and realize that, you're not starting a business because you have children. Oh, so you mean that no entrepreneurs in the entire history of entrepreneurs have ever had children? Is that what you're telling me? Well, no. Like, okay. So they talk to me like a coach. If I don't have time, like, I hear this. That's the number one defeatist thing. Well, I just don't have time. When you say that to me, my response is, first I'll smile at you and I'll say, "Show me your phone and show me your calendar. I want to see what your calendar looks like because I've never literally met anyone in the history of any kind of interaction that does not have time." And you know the answer to this. They
Yeah.
never have a calendar. They never have it. So if you're not managing the time that you have, you do have time, you're just not managing, and so whatever you are working on is your priority, and I always reframe that. So if sitting on the couch and binge watching Netflix is what you're doing, that's your priority. If playing video games is what you're doing, that's your priority. If socializing and partying is your thing, that's your priority, and when you call it a priority, it sounds weird, but whatever you're focusing on is your priority.
Mm.
Whether you accept it or not, that is your priority, and so, if that makes you feel weird, maybe you should question what you're doing because is that really your priority? Is that
Yeah.
going to get you to the goals that you have in your life? And so, I don't require a lot of motivation, and to be real, I'd say less than half the time, I would say I'm feeling motivated or excited about something, but at the end of the day, I just want the result, and so I'm driven by results. I
Mm.
know what the results are, and being a former project manager, I'm really good at working backwards from goals and results and timelines, and so I just identify the tasks, and I just work backwards and I execute.
I love that. Let's touch on that a bit because I hear a lot of people, and I've heard you say this a little bit, and I really like it. So I want to make sure people are listening. You did some of the jobs to get what you wanted. So many people are like, but it's not my passion. I don't really like, I don't know. I just trying to find my passion. In the meantime, they're watching Netflix and, doing whatever. And because they're like, I'm just waiting to find the actual thing that's for me. Touch a little bit about the whole and you said and I love this because this is something I feel. I'm like, am I supposed to feel more motivated or more excited? Yeah. And you just said half the time you really don't feel that way. So I love that. How would you help coach someone or say to someone that's in that space where they're looking for their thing, but in the meantime, sometimes your thing is not your thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Sometimes your thing pays for your thing. So how you know what I'm trying to say? How do you touch on that?
I get it. Yeah, that's a common one, and I actually touch on that in my book. I call it staircase businesses because
I like that.
one of the biggest defeating responses when you say to someone, say, "Why don't you start a business?" They always say, "Well, I don't have time," or "I don't have money," and all the common excuses. And so if you don't have money, you better make time, and if you do have money, you can shortcut time, but The problem is that people have like these dream businesses because they watch Instagram and
Yeah.
TikTok and they see these people, humble bragging about shit that are really not making. They're just full of crap. And they go, well, I want a business like that. Like, so let me just paint some kind of stupid picture to kind of illustrate this. Like, if I were to say like what my dream business is today, I'd say I would like to own a Ferrari dealership in the Alps of Italy that has a built-in racetrack and giant garages and I can invite all my friends to come hang out and we can look at the lake and we can look at the mountains and we could race our Ferraris around. Like that sounds amazing, but
That sounds amazing.
realistically, I don't have multi-billions of dollars that it would require to own that business. So do I just go, I guess I can't have my dream business. I should just not try. I should just quit. That's how people are. They
It is.
they have this dream business and it requires a lot of capital and I can't do that. So they feel defeated. And so you have to look at all of your businesses like staircases. Like, okay, so that's your dream business. We can get to that 20 years from now, but what can you do today? What could you start today, given your current level of resources, your current level of skill, your interest, curiosity, the amount of resources you do have, and go start that. And maybe that starts to cash flow and does a little, make some profit for you, and you're able to fund your next step on the staircase. And then maybe you exit that one and you make some money, and then you're able to roll that into the next one. And so we have to think about building career of entrepreneurship as steps in a staircase to get to what we want sometimes. So in summary, you have to be willing to do what it takes right now in order to get what you want. And most people aren't willing to do that. Another I'll say a sidebar conversation. We see this on social media is the shaming of people that are employees versus entrepreneurs. Like I've seen so much animosity of this, like, well, if you're a 9 to 5er, you're a piece of shit. And like, if only the alpha dogs are the entrepreneur, like all the bullshit versions of that, right? It's
Yeah.
bullshit. And guys, like you heard, I was making multiple six figures as a salaried worker. That is far more than most small business owners earn, actually. I mean, the average
True.
income for a small business owner is around $100,000. Like it's not a big number. And so, yeah, there are people out there making a lot of money and doing really well, but that's not the norm. And so sometimes you have to work that job to be able to fund your entrepreneurial dream. And there's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes you start a business and it fails and you have to go back and get another job. And I've seen some people, actually former clients, that had that resistance, like, I'm going to do what it takes. I'm never going to go back to work. It's like,
Right. And they
oh,
run
you're out of,
themselves right
you're out
to
of
the
money.
ground.
You're out of money. Like your chips are cashed. You went all in. Like you have to do something to build your pile back up. So suck up your pride, go knock those doors like I did as a kid and figure out what it needs. You got to be willing to do what it takes. And if what it takes is you having to have a temporary job to fund some runway for your business idea, then that's what it takes. Like I don't like to have the excuses of like, oh well, I'm too good for that and I'm never going back. Like that's stupid. Like I would go back if I couldn't do what I'm doing right now. I would go back. Like that's what it takes.
Hmm. I like that. That's a really good thought for people listening, to do what it takes and it's okay to go back if you have to. Yeah, I've
Nothing
seen
wrong with it.
people that and then I've seen people that, have to go back and then they just quit their side hustle or whatever. I'm like, "Well, keep it going can be a side hustle and
Yes.
eventually it'll keep growing, but like go back and pay your bills. You got to eat." Like, especially if you do have kids, you do have to look after them. So, like, you can make some money. So go make some money. Um, I love that. That's so good. What's another common thing that you see when because you do a lot of coaching, um, how would you talk to someone about the idea of investing in like a coach or a mentor or whatever you want to call it? And a lot of people are like, well, I'll do that when I have money. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that one?
Well, that if you compare it to, let's say, getting a college education, you
Hmm.
didn't have money, but you still invested in the education. And arguably, if you're going to college, I would say 9 out of 10 degrees are worthless anyways, but you're still spending 50,000 to $100,000 to get a degree nowadays. And you're actually learning from a lot of professors who have never achieved anything in their life. They became professors and they just wanted to stay in the educational system. And so, why does society think it's okay to go invest and take these loans and things like that to get a college education where if you were to go do an apprenticeship or actually, learn from someone who's actually achieved the things that you would like to achieve, you're probably going to get a much faster result. And it's actually going to be based on actual experience instead of professorship.
Hmm.
And so I think there's this weird shift where people, like you said, oh, I'll do that when I have money. Well, I look at really coaching as a simple thing. It's not a good marketing, word, but you hire a mentor or a coach for mistake avoidance.
Mm.
But that's not really sexy in marketing. Like if I was to go out there and go, "Hey, mistake avoidance. I'm going to help you guys with," like, that doesn't even sound like
Right.
interesting to people. But the reality is you're trying to avoid mistakes because mistakes cost you a lot of money and a lot of time. Both are very valuable. So if you learn from the right people who've actually done things, you will save way more money and not making mistakes and wasting years of your time doing the wrong things. And that money invested will go back into making a lot more money. So it's an acceleration.
That's so good. I love that. Um, all right, switching gears a little bit. Let's go into, what you're primarily getting into now is exit strategy. Briefly touch on, and guys, if you're listening to this, all of Tony's information will be in the show notes. Reach out if you have some questions, because obviously we're just grazing the surface. But what's the number one, top whatever, one or two mistakes that you see a lot of people make when they are working on like an exit strategy from their business?
The assumption that I see most small businesses they make is they think that their company is worth something on the market only because they look at maybe they make a good living from it. Let's say you do make the six-figure earnings from a company and you assume like, well, I've been doing this for 10 years, 15 years. And, clearly if I want to retire or sell, like it's going to be worth something, isn't it? And it's really shocking when you go start to look in the data of exiting companies.
Mm.
Only about 20% of businesses get sold. And so
Mhm.
you think, well, that's a really low number. Is it because 80% of the businesses aren't for sale? Like, no, it's every business either goes out of business eventually or they get sold. Like it's just how it is. Like you're going to
Right.
change hands. Like nobody lives forever. And so when you realize like, well, why only 20% of these businesses getting sold? Because I know, at least half of business owners are profitable, and maybe another 40% are kind of like, not say like 20% are kind of just dog paddling in the water, just keeping their head above water, but they're kind of breaking even.
Mhm.
And then 40% of businesses, unfortunately, are usually losing money every year because just, something's wrong in the company. And so if 40% of the companies are profitable, but only 20% sell, then why is there such a discrepancy? And what it breaks down is because people do not understand how to build valuable companies. They're not looking at enterprise value. They're maybe looking at how to replace their jobs. They're self-employed and they're making money and they may have a good lifestyle, but maybe they have too much involvement in the company's success themselves. There's no succession plan, and they don't realize that buyers are not always looking for a job, especially if a multi-million dollar exit is what you want. Someone that's buying a company for multi-millions of dollars, usually private equity or small other companies acquiring to scale, they're not looking for a job. They don't want your job. They want a cash flowing money machine. And so if you build a machine and there's input, which is investment dollars and employee labor and things like that, and then there's some designated output, but it doesn't rely on you as the owner, as the operator, then you've built a really solid machine that, could hopefully scale. And maybe it's in an emerging market or industry that has a higher valuation multiple. And so people don't understand these things. And I didn't understand this until I sold my first company. That was 2007 to a private equity company. And weirdly, I mean, I always had a gut instinct on what made a company valuable, even though that wasn't my intention to build something to sell. But I did things that made sense to me as a business, or like recurring revenue, extended long-term, cash flow positive contracts. I built my company based on advertising revenue. So I say, hey, if you do quarterly, it's this price. We'll give you a discount if you go 6 months. We'll give you a bigger discount if you go a year in advance. And so they're paying me positive cash flow upfront, sometimes a year in advance. And so annual recurring revenue was huge. We had 150 advertising accounts. We were doing live events around the country for racing and car shows. And so we're building revenue and building audience from those things. And I also knew that the larger the database of users I could create, the more value that company was because I could go after higher advertising rates and more dollars. And so I was doing things instinctively, go, hey, if I can get more people to sign up, I can raise my advertising rates. It'll attract more advertisers because the audience is bigger. I have more leverage, and I could charge more. And it kind of had this spin flywheel effect, right? And so I kind of went through that entire process, and yeah, we did really well. We sold for a few million, but at the end of the day, maybe 6, 7 years later, when I started looking back on that deal, knowing what I knew then, it's like, I probably left 1 million on the table. I'm pretty sure I left 1 million on the table. That's why they were so happy to be like, "Yep, we'll take that deal." I countered and they were like, "Okay." Right? So they took the deal too fast, and I wasn't being greedy at the time. I was like, "Okay, okay, I did okay. It was more than I ever thought I would make." But looking back and as I became more of a nerd in the scaling and exit phase of things and helping other clients and friends go through that as well, I was like, "Oh, I was a rookie and I should have been asking more questions. I just felt like not taken advantage of, just but kinda naive, right?"
Right.
And so I started to realize like, oh, there's a lot of business owners that are very naive and don't understand this. Even if they're making good money, they don't understand this kind of stuff. And then if you go actually and look out there in the influencer space and the social media space, or even in the book space, very few people who have exited a company actually talk about the process and what that entails and the emotional up and down roller coasters and all the things to create valuation. They don't talk about it. And
Mhm.
why? Because people that have successful exits, they usually kinda retire and they go do their thing with their money, and they're not really looking to educate people on that kinda stuff, and so, I've always been educating people, saw that I sold a company, it's very public, and hundreds of thousands of people, that were members, they were very public, and so people would always come to me for advice on this kinda stuff, and I was always learning a little bit more and learning a little bit more and doing bigger deals, and so it's, I think that to boil your question, like, most people just have this relatively unknown thing about exiting a company, and unfortunately, they're gonna learn the hard way that their company is not worth anything, and it's gonna kick them in the nuts at the end, or they're gonna realize, like, it's not worth nearly as much as they thought, or they're gonna lose money on the table because they didn't ask the right questions and build the right, understanding of the process, and so that's something I kinda you could tell I geek out about that entire phase of it because I felt like that's the biggest opportunity. I mean, you can make a living with a business and operations, but usually the exits, those transactions at the end are what makes people step up in their life, like big steps in their life.
That's good. I love that. Well, in wrapping up, I always have 3 final questions and then anything we didn't touch on that'd be really impactful. Like I said, once again, guys, reach out to Tony. He's super approachable. If you have any questions on anything we're talking about. But first and final question, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but if someone is looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you could say that could help them find it?
One sentence. Understand that your purpose will change as you go through decades of your life, and that you may not know your purpose right now, but it will always change about every decade of your life.
Interesting. I like that. Second one, what's a favorite quote and why?
The quote I put in my book is that fear and confidence are both imaginary. Choose one and live with it.
Well, that third question, what's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
Man, that's a good deep question. What do I want on a gravestone? He did his best.
Hmm. It's good. All right, you run into someone in a coffee shop, they listen to this, they learned a whole bunch. What's something, though, we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners?
I think the overlying message, especially in entrepreneurship, is just start. You don't have to be perfect. There's never going to be a perfect time, but the biggest regret for most entrepreneurs is not starting earlier. And so quit trying to be perfect and know everything and read all the books and listen to all the podcasts before you start. Just start. The best entrepreneurs, especially the ones I've interviewed on my show, they just operated and got kicked in the teeth a lot of times and they figured that out as they went. And that's how I did it.
That's good. And guys, yes, Tony has his own podcast. Make sure to listen. We'll have that stuff in the show notes. Definitely follow and follow Tony and see what you can learn from him because I know you'll learn a lot. Let's go out there, guys. If we can change one life or one starfish at a time together, we can change the world. Thanks for being on.